Hi everyone, welcome to the first presentation for the Research Consortium in Argosy. Today I have the opportunity to talk to you about how to choose a methodology. And for that, I would like to divide this presentation in three sections. The first one is the introduction to research. The second one is the selection of a methodology. And the third one is how to match your findings to what you have chosen. So the first part, when we talk about a methodology or choosing a form to do research, we need to be very clear about what we want to do. And for that, we need to define our interest by means of a question. Um, the question, the formulating a question has to be something that is quite precise, but also something that invites us to dig deeper into an answer. It's very important to keep in mind that a research question, it's about asking something that we do not know rather than something that we want to prove because we already have a preconceived notion of what the answer is. So by formulating a question, we are able to determine multiple things. First of all, we should determine what we want to find out, how we wanted to find it out, with whom or for whom we want to find it out, and what's the point of doing this investigation, this research? What makes, what helps, who benefits from this? So in research, we have two different kinds of regular paradigms. One is quantitative and the other one is qualitative. And we also have now mixed methods. But generally speaking, these two forms of research tend to be seen as contrasting or polarizing in different directions. Nevertheless, research is research. And somehow both of them complement each other. So to begin with, if you want to do something that is quantitative, is because whatever you want to study will be transformed in numbers. And the idea of transforming that into number is because you want to quantify that. If, in the qualitative aspect of it, if you want to understand an experience, if you want to describe an experience, or if you already have done some quantitative investigation, and there are some numbers or the results that you have obtained are not full and they're not clear, then you have the argument for a qualitative study. So what does it mean when we talk about building the argument? You build an argument by means of an explanation that you give in order to answer the research question that you propose. It's very important that when you are doing research, you ask a question, and ideally one single question. While having multiple questions within a study may be or may seem sophisticated, the technical part of it becomes very cumbersome because each one of those questions required most of the time a separate study. When you are part of the research team, having multiple questions is very feasible. If you are doing a dissertation, probably is not the best avenue. Why? Because you will have to have a high level of statistical sophistication to justify your study. Or if you're doing a qualitative study, you will have to have multiple conversations. And each conversation can take between 3 to 8 hours just to transcribe, and much longer to be able to interpret the meaning that you have in those conversations. And then you need to tabulate all that you have found by means of coding in each one of those conversations to transform them in what eventually is usually known as themes. That's very time consuming and most of the time not feasible for the dissertation. Therefore, the formulation of a research question is the best in the first part that you should do. The research question should answer as many possible questions as you can. Where you're going to do the study, with whom you're going to do the study, why you're going to do the study, how the study is going to be carried out. For instance, and I'll call my dissertation, um, mine was a phenomenological study. In phenomenology, there are different kinds of phenomenology, and mine was about hermeneutic. It was based on hermeneutic phenomenology. So what I usually do is show you what I did for mine, or how mine came to be, and then how this research question was developed in my dissertation. Each study is unique and different, so you should always be careful about not trying to do what others did, but actually do what works for you. And the reason why I'm going to share my question is because it allows you to see that it took me about 6 months to actually finalize that a research question should answer as many questions as possible. And based on the research question, you have an argument. You build an argument by means of which the readers, in this case your committee members, will be able to understand what you are doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing what you're doing. It's very important also to notice that a research question, it's about defining the methodology. That will be the second part of the presentation. The research question has to aim towards a methodology that will justify why you are doing what you are doing. A research question has to be convincing about what you plan on doing. A research question has to mention who you're working with, or who you're going to do research with, or to whom you're going to do an experiment. So the formulation of research question is the basis for building the argument. It's like the trunk from which there are roots and there are branches on top of it. It has to be solid and it has to be telling. For me, it was what is the lived experience of being a Latina or Latino peer mentee in a public research institution of higher education. And I share this because for a long time I thought about this, and I went to many seminars to finalize what I was doing. When we talk about an experience, we usually refer to qualitative. But when we use technical language, we tend to be more specific. So a lived experience usually aims toward the understanding of something, but at the same time is a technical word um, from phenomenology. At the same time, when we talk about what is like, we are implying that we're looking for a description, understanding, not necessarily how much, not necessarily the why, not necessarily for how long, but implicitly we're asking for an explanation, something that it's more than just one word, more than a number could possibly tell you. And then for whom or with whom? Latina and Latino peer mentee, with whom I was going to research, with a very specific population. And where? In a public research institution. Of what kind of higher education? Obviously, a university. So I was not doing this in a community college. I was not doing this in a religious institution. So by being very specific, I cross off all the other possibilities. It strengthened the specificity of my study. It weakens in the sense of this is what it is and all the other things are not. But it gives the reader a sense of security about where you are aiming with this study and with whom or for whom. It strengthens and weakens, but don't be scared of being very specific and seeing that maybe your study is very restricted to a very particular population. With the amount of time and resources you've got, it's not a good idea to expand as much as you can. Remember, the dissertation is only the beginning of your career. So you need to do something that is very, very well written rather than that something that is very, very extensive. So that was an example of an example of a qualitative question. Let me share another example that it's a tricky one. And I shared that in my qualitative class. There was this student who proposes to do a study, and in his mind, he wants to do a qualitative study. And he believes it's qualitative because he plans on going to the metro. The metro is a means of transportation we have in DC here, most probably the most popular one. And he wants to find out, what experience is like for these people that take the metro. And for that, he goes to one train station and start talking to the people. When do you take the metro? What is the best time for you to take the metro? And he engages in conversation, person after person, person after person. That was what he proposed. And then at the end, he's going to write a qualitative study about the experience of riding the metro or riding the metro. So when he brought that example to the class, and I said, at the end, what would you think you would get? And he says, I'm going to get a qualitative impression of what people think the best time for the metro is and when they take it. So you are telling me that you probably will find that some people take the metro before rush hour, people take it after rush hour, and those who in the rush hour will say the experience is this, and those who are in no rush hour may say that? Yes, and I will have all the descriptions for that. So, and I question him, if you're able to group these people and classify these people and turn these people into categories or maybe numbers, saying 80% of the people prefer to take the metro during rush hour, whereas 20 prefer to take it before or after. Could that be possible? Yeah, probably I could get that number for you, he said. And then what if I can tell you that people who take the metro, and 90% of them enjoy the experience and 10% don't enjoy the experience? Probably I could get that too. And I said, and if then you can classify the degrees of what people do, which lines they take. Well, I could possibly do that. One transfer, two transfer, no transfer. So if you can get all those categories and those numbers, what makes you believe that even though you have talked to people, interview people, transcribe conversation, encode that, that's a qualitative study, if you can turn all that into numbers or categories? He thought for a moment. Well, I can explain where those numbers come from, probably. But what you have done is not necessarily a qualitative study, even though you talk to people, interview people, transcribe conversations. While those are characteristics of qualitative research, those things can be turned into numbers. And if I were a reviewer of your study, I would tell you, give me the numbers in one page, which possibly can be done. So you have presented a research question and interest, what is like experience for people taking the metro when they take it the most, or how they feel about taking the metro. That was your research. But the argument that you presented could be turned against you from a qualitative into a quantitative. So what you propose not necessarily is exclusively quantitative. So there you go. A research question not only has to simulate the tradition that you have chosen or you choose or you desire, but at the same time, the argument by means of that question can stand has to be parallel to that. In my case, what is the experience like for Latino peer mentees? It's not whether they get the best GPA, not whether how many enroll in peer mentoring program, how often they meet, even though all those categories may come up. What I'm trying to discover, or what I tried in my study, was to explain this is what happened to these people who happen to be in a peer mentee program at a tier research one institution. The numbers probably will be obtained in another study, but let me tell you what they experience. Whoever is in this program, this is what they're telling about this program. So that brings us to that notion of methodology. A methodology is a plan of action, a way to go about things, how things can be done. And they are done by means of a plan. It is very often that we encounter students with a chosen methodology or tradition approach to do research, but their methodology not necessarily is clear or matches what they want. There was this student who wanted to do a phenomenological study because he wanted to study a certain population. But at the end, he thinks at the end of his study, I'm going to be able to tell, what people go through in order for them to become this. And then I questioned him. So if you want to do phenomenology, but at the end you will get how the people go or what the people go through in order to become who they are, isn't it that grounded theory rather than phenomenology? Because you're telling me people go stage one, stage two, stage three, and then they become this, right? And he thought for a moment and he reviewed Creswell and he realized, yes, he may feel attracted to phenomenology, but actually his study was grounded theory. Another example from the quantitative paradigm. You want to study how how many people graduate in 2 years in the program. Well, that's a very good example of a simple study, but a very quantitative one. If your objective is to know how many people graduate within the program, you can do surveys, you can research graduation, you can go to the record, you can obtain all the numbers to figure it out based on those who respond to your surveys and the ones that you are able to track down through the data available after the IRB give you permission to do that, when they graduate and how long it takes them to graduate. And then probably you can summarize that in one page and a few numbers. It may be simple, but it's very clear cut. Not always research is so clear cut. But how do you go about it? The topic of today's presentation is building the argument for your research question. If your research question is just to say, how long people or how many people graduate within 2 years, what's the point of it? So a research question, as I said, not only has to be very specific and it has to stand the trial and the questioning of others, but also it has to have a reason. Why? What does it do for others, for them, for you? You invest so much time. So the argument not necessarily has to do with what you want to find out, but what is the purpose of your study? And there you go. The argument would be, how long does it take for, and you can choose, Latino students to graduate in 2 years in a program X? That is similar to the previous question, but it's very specific. So if I were an administrator in that program and I want to reach out to more Latinos within the program, I would be very interested to know how long does it take them to graduate. And it is above or below the mean that I have for the general population. And if it is above, what's happening to them that they're taking longer to graduate than the average student at the institution or the program? If I were a student, I want to find out how long it takes. It would be interesting for me to find out how long it takes for me as a Latino student to graduate from that particular program if I happen to apply for that program. For a recruiter, knowing that that particular population may take longer to graduate in a particular program, they know that targeting that population is targeting a population that will be floating a student for a very long time. So maybe until something is done in the program, reaching out to other groups in the meanwhile could be more effective for me because I'm going to be able to sell a product that is more appealing. So building the argument, it has to do a lot with the methodology. What is the purpose, first of all, of what you want to do it for? Second, in terms of the methodology, what is your plan of action? How will you go about in order to answer the research questions? In the first part of the presentation, I talk about the value of choosing a question that can be tested and be self-telling about the methodology you want to use, or the tradition you want to use, or the approach you want to use. But also the methodology has to tell you, what the steps will be in between, inside, in order for you to get there. So first of all, find an applicability, and that's part of the research question. Second, tell what steps you will take in order to carry out that research. Very often we have sometimes great questions, but very unclear path to answer the question. Or sometimes the more common mistake is we have a great question, we have a gap, things have happened, and the researcher tell us, and all of a sudden we have fantastic findings. But somehow the linkage between that formulation of a great question to the finding get lost in between, because there is no clarity of how those very compelling findings came about. So methodology has to be with not only a question, a selection of approach or system, but also the plan of action. And lastly, in order to build an argument, it's very important to connect what you want to study with what you can say and you will say. It is very often the case that the students are driven by a mission or a calling more than a study. They have a population they want to serve. They have a calling for a certain group or a certain situation or circumstance in life that, as counselors or psychologists, they want to go about and help. But they don't realize that research is about smaller pieces of life experiences. So while they do a study with 20 people, they want to talk about the larger population they dream of in their career. And that's something that we need to be very careful about, what we actually can say based on what we have done. If we have interviewed 5 people because we're very interested in a human experience, or what is it like for that particular people to live such experience, at the end of the study, all we can do and we should say is what we were very craftfully able to uncover from the 5 people that we interview, for whatever number of interviews or conversation we have with them. On the other hand, we can probably suggest that that experience, since we have crafted it very well, could be similar, could be relatable to others who are in similar circumstances or belong to the same group. But we should be very careful on not extrapolating that to the general population. And that was an example from qualitative. For quantitative, is the same. While we can have a large number of people, we can never, never, never have the entire universe of a population. Therefore, we have to be measured about what we say. So finally, today's topic was building an argument. An argument, it also has to do with what we can say, what we will be able to say, and how we can say it, based on what we have done, based on the number of people that we have engaged in our study as subject participants, and based on the information that we have processed. Lastly, as a student who's doing a study on service learning within a particular class. And while the study has been very much in depth and an extensive literature has been done, and the conversations were very well uh, developed, at the end of the study, it can only be said what these people reveal in that particular class at that particular time with that particular researcher. Why? Because there are confinements in terms of the information that we handle, and compartments in terms of what we are able to assert based on what we have done, and based on with whom we have spoken, and based on at the time that we have done something. That also applies for quantitative research, since we can never survey entire group, entire universe of people for whatever group we want to investigate with, or we can never test all the possible members of a group. We have to be major and cautious about what we can actually say. So what is the secret of building an argument for a good research question? Having clarity of what we want to do, who we wanted to do it with, where we wanted to do it, for how long we wanted to do it, who benefits from what we want to do, and to give meaning to what we have been able to uncover, rather than the mission that is driven us to do that research. That will prevent us from making the final big mistake, which is to say more than we are capable of sustaining or supporting. So there you go. A research question is about specificity, it's about strength, and it's about being cautious about what we plan on doing. And if it's a dissertation what you are planning to do, be careful about what you are about to do. But on the other hand, be very strong about the specificity of your study. The limitation of your study is the strength of your study. And at the same time, the clarity of what you have done will build the best argument for what you offer as the finding of your study, whether it is an experiment, as a treatment, or analyzing the meaning of a human lived experience. Good luck. I wish you the best and thank you. This is Dr. Gomez from Argosy University, completing the first research consortium program. Thank you.